The Delta Force Hawk Ops Alpha has been out for a couple of days now, and I think the response to it has been pretty positive. I've been having a great time with the game, and I think lots of other people who have maybe felt a little bit kind of disappointed with Battlefield 2042 or DMZ ending earlier have found a new game that they can really sink their teeth into, and I fit perfectly within that Venn diagram. There is, however, one part of the community that's really not happy with the game, and that all seems to come down to the way it uses bots, or AI players. Now, I've talked about bots before on the channel and how I think they might eventually be essential for PvP online gaming, and in this video we're going to drill down into that, particularly with Delta Force, talk about how bots get used in the game, what the upsides of it are, and also what the potential problems are. So, how does Delta Force use bots? There's two main modes in Delta Force Hawk Ops. One of them, Hazard Operations, is the extraction shooter, and in your first couple of games of that, your teammates will be bots, and all of the enemies on the map will be bots. Some of them will be pretending to be real players, and the game doesn't tell you. The game doesn't say, hey, these are fake players, but you'll notice them doing stupid things like they'll take ages to shoot, they'll miss quite a lot, they'll get stuck on geometry occasionally, they just seem pretty stupid. And in your first couple of games, you'll probably end up wiping the entire lobby. You should really make the most of that and loot everything you possibly can. Then, after a few games, they'll end up kind of disappearing and they'll get replaced by real players, and obviously they put up a much stiffer challenge. And you'll also find that your teammates aren't quite as obedient. The bot teammates will follow you around whatever you want to do, they'll try to help you, they'll revive you, they'll use their abilities. Obviously real human teammates aren't always that useful. I was streaming today and some people were saying, oh, it's like typical DMZ teammates, where as soon as you start, people run off in different directions. Because I'm in Europe, a lot of the times people don't talk, because obviously we have lots of different languages in Europe, so people are kind of used to not being able to talk to each other. It can be a bit of a nightmare. But the bots didn't do that. The bots would always help you out. In the other mode, which is a bit more like Battlefield's, like their kind of breakthrough mode from Battlefield, where one team has to defend a bunch of points and then the other team has to try and capture them, but there's loads of players on each team, bots are used in that in your first couple of games too. Pretty much your entire team will probably be bots, and the enemy team will almost entirely be bots, and that means that you'll be able to get loads of easy kills, and even though your teammates are bots, they do seem to be pretty helpful. They will still use all of their abilities, they will still revive you, you'll be able to spawn on them. It leads to a pretty good game. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. In my first couple of games playing that in the alpha, I had an absolute blast. I decided to start sniping and I was struggling a little bit with that at first, but once I got to grips with it, I was holding an objective and there were enemy tanks coming in, there were enemies sort of pushing in all different areas, and my team were really valiantly managing to hold it and managing to keep on reinforcing the lines, and we were pushing them back, and the game ended up feeling quite close, but I ended up winning and went on some ridiculous kill streak with the sniper rifle. I thought it was absolutely awesome, and I was like, yeah, I can't wait to make a video from this. I look so cool. I look like I'm Jack Frags, running around with a sniper rifle in a Battlefield style game, getting loads of kills. This is awesome. And then in the second game, I noticed I had a challenge where I had to get 10 kills with an SMG. So I equipped a class that had an SMG, one of the medics. And then I was holding the points in that and I was reviving people. I managed to kind of single-handedly rally a group to hold a point for ages, throwing down smoke, firing my dart gun into healing it, and then taking out loads of enemies with my SMG. And again, it seemed like a super fun fight. It was going absolutely awesome. We were getting pushed back slowly, but we were kind of holding our own. I was getting a bunch of kills, and then I actually managed to earn the top kind of reward that you get for getting points in the game, where you fire a massive missile onto the map, and that was the thing that won us the game. I dropped that on the enemy positions just as they were taking one of our last objectives, and that won the game for us. And I was like, that was absolutely awesome. What an incredible game. What an incredible 2 games. And then before I decided to make a video about them, I was just reading some stuff on the subreddit, and in the subreddit they were talking about how, oh yeah, in your first couple of games, they'll all be bots. All the enemies will be bots, all your teammates will be bots, you'll probably be the only real person in that game. And that was a little bit crushing. I was like, oh, I can't really make a video about this, because even though I thought I was having an amazing time and I was getting all of these kills and I was doing something that felt very memorable in the way that it used to be in Battlefield, turns out I was just playing against myself. I was just essentially playing a single player game. And then I started thinking, does that really matter? If I now go back into the game, now I've done a couple, and I'm up against real players, and then I have less fun because I'm getting killed by the real players, I'm not getting those crazy streaks, maybe the game won't be quite as close because I'm guessing it won't have sort of tight skill-based matchmaking in this, and I have less fun, does that mean I preferred the game when I was just fighting against bots? Does it change anything now I know that they're bots? That's a really, really hard question. And it's something that I really wanted to think about in this video is, if I have more fun sometimes when I'm playing against bots, does that mean the game's better with bots? Was it better before I knew that they were bots? Is it good that the game doesn't tell you they're bots at all? The game even tries to give them like gamery style gamer tags, so they've all got like TTV in their name and things like that. Some of them are just like rude jokes and stuff. It seems like they're trying really hard to convince you that they're real, but then once you find out that they're bots, lots of people have decided, oh, well then the game's rubbish. I was getting loads of kills, I was winning, but it's all meaningless if they weren't real players, if there's no real competition. And that's kind of what it comes down to, I think. People want to compete against other real players. Now, in the past, I definitely would have agreed with those people. I definitely would have thought, yeah, playing against bots isn't that interesting. There's a bunch of games where you can play against bots if you want. You can play Warzone's Boot Camp right now, where most of the enemies will be bots. You could start a private match of Call of Duty and just fill it up with bots. And I don't think many people do that because it's not a huge amount of fun. The bots aren't that smart. They don't play like real people. It just feels a bit like a shooting gallery. Of course, you can turn the difficulty up if you want. You know, people act as if bots will always be easy, but that's just because they've been designed to be easy. If you want, you can have bots that always know where you are. You can have bots that have perfect aim. Basically, bots could be the perfect cheaters in a game if you wanted to fight against that. But then that wouldn't be fun either, because you're just getting defeated by something that's essentially cheating, that has advantages that you don't. So that's not particularly fun. What I think Delta Force has done that's a little bit different to any other game is that they found a way to make the bots act realistically. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. Like, definitely when I was playing the Battlefield style mode, there were times where suddenly there'd be loads of bots all clustered in one place and I could just spray them all down with my SMG, get kills. That was super easy. Occasionally bots will kind of run out into the open and seem like they don't quite know what they're doing. The way they use tanks is very convincing, but I haven't seen them flying helicopters or anything like that. So it seems like there are definitely limits to the bots. But as it stands, in that Battlefield style mode, the bots seem realistic enough to me. The times where they do something weird is rare enough that that's kind of the amount of times I'd expect to see people doing something weird. You know, sometimes you see players doing something stupid. Someone who's AFK in the middle of the battlefield because they had to answer their phone or something. Or people who are playing for the first time and are just shooting at a wall. Stuff like that does happen. So when you see the bots doing something weird, it's not too irritating. If I can go into a game with my friends on my team and then we can go into a match where the battle's really close, because I'm guessing the AI is doing something where if one side is winning, then the other side will get a little bit stronger, or the side that's winning will get a bit weaker, where it can keep on doing pushes and it can keep the battlefield feeling dynamic and it doesn't feel the same every time, then that's probably more fun than playing against people who might be cheating, or playing against people who play all day every day and are much, much better than me. Knowing that you're going into a fight where things are kind of fair is maybe a worthy trade-off, because when I'm playing a mode like Battlefield, I don't know if I really care if the other team are bots or not. Going into the extraction mode, it's a little bit more difficult, because whereas in the Battlefield mode you've got these massive teams, and a lot of the time you're not really paying that much attention to what everyone else is doing. You're kind of fighting an army, and you have an army behind you, so they can be doing stuff that's a little bit unrealistic, and as long as the entire battlefield feels dynamic, it's kind of okay. With an extraction shooter, it's much more intimate. You've only got 2 other people on your team, so you're going to be paying attention to what they're doing. You've only got like teams of 3 coming up against you, so in a fight, there's normally only like 6 people. You're going to be paying attention to what each individual person's doing, or each individual bot is doing, and that makes life a bit trickier. So how does it work in there? Well, surprisingly, it works okay. Despite those first couple of games you play where the bots seem really stupid, I'm starting to think in Delta Force Hawk Ops, there's actually 2 different kinds of bots. There's the kind of starter bots, the easy bots, just like if you're playing Call of Duty in a private game and you set the bots to recruit. And then there's some much smarter bots that I think are probably the smartest bots I've ever seen in any game. In a technical test, me and Stode, or Stod, was playing a game, And this was after Tommy Rage from Two Angry Gamers had left. We had an extra person fill in on our team. And it turned out they were a bot. But we didn't realize until right at the end of the match. Yeah.
The fact that the way they play almost does play like cheaters, though. Because he was, like, trying to shoot me through the box when I walk around the corner. So I don't know.
Like the bot. I think, do you think our teammate's a bot, maybe?
Honest, the AI is that's all I'll say.
Yeah. Hey, buddy, are you a real person?
Well, there you go. Our teammate is currently running into a door, though, so I'm slightly concerned. Maybe. I don't know, guys. I don't know. He could be new to FPS game. He's working his way around. The fact that they even have bots that are this responsive is pretty insane.
Yeah. We'd been playing with them for like 20 minutes before we realized that they were a bot. They were following us around, they were shooting things, they were using their abilities, they were reviving us. It was only when they got stuck on a door, which they couldn't get through, but they obviously thought they could, so they were just bumping up against it over and over again, and they wouldn't go around to go out a different way. That was the only time that we noticed that they were a bot. Up until then, they just seemed like a very quiet player, someone who just wasn't talking or pinging very much. It'd be nice if they could let the bots ping. I think that would be really useful. But other than that, I couldn't really tell that they were a bot at all. And similarly, while I was playing this morning on Delta Force, it was a long while after my first few games. I was up to like level 20 or so, something like that. And I guess because I was playing early in the morning, there wasn't that many other people online. I was still finding games super quickly, which, you know, would happen if they're filling it up with bots if they can't find players. I was finding matches really quickly, and I seemed to be doing really well. I was getting a lot more kills than usual. To be honest, I was having a great time. And the enemy teams that I was coming up against felt like real teams. They felt like real players. When I was fighting them, they seemed to do realistic things. They seemed to flank and sort of use all their abilities properly, try to cover each other, using smoke a lot and stuff like that. But then when I killed them, their loot just seemed a little bit off. Their loot seemed a little bit weird, like maybe they weren't real players. And I was left with the nagging feeling that how come I can kill entire teams by myself now, when yesterday I was getting absolutely obliterated in basically every one-on-one gunfight. And that made me think, okay, some of these people are probably bots. And I realized it was super hard to tell. It's even got to the point where now, when I'm playing a game, I'll often just try and get the other people to talk, and if they won't talk on their mic, I'll at least say, hey, if you can hear me, can you jump up and down for my teammates, so I can try and work out if they're bots or not, because if I don't do that, I don't really know how to tell. And I've even found myself today, once I started getting some teammates that weren't bots, feeling a bit down about it. I kind of preferred the bots. You know, I've had teammates running off by themselves, getting themselves killed, and then getting angry that we're not reviving them when they're being camped by an entire team. I've had people running off to go do objectives when we're in the middle of a team fight. I've had people running forwards and stealing all my loot. I've even come up against some enemies who I think might be cheating. People who were, you know, doing things like jumping out behind a wall and shooting me and killing me instantly when they shouldn't have really known that I was there. Things like that seem super suspicious, but then when I'm fighting the bots, that never seems to happen. I seem to be genuinely having a good time. Now, the reason I've been saying for a long while that I think bots are maybe essential in PvP is that I think there's some problems that online PvP just can't get around. One of the problems is cheaters. Obviously, anyone who's played Call of Duty, anyone who's played DMZ or Warzone knows what it's like, where sometimes you have someone seemingly doing something impossible and you think they're probably cheating. Now, obviously there's lots of anti-cheat type things, like Call of Duty has Ricochet, lots of other games use easy anti-cheat, but the people who make those anti-cheats have kind of admitted we can't always keep up. You know, it's a constant race where they'll keep developing the anti-cheat, other people will find ways around it. There's a huge amount of money in this, particularly for a game like Call of Duty, so the people who are making cheats are willing to invest a lot of money in order to kind of find a way to cheat at the game. And so Ricochet, the Call of Duty team, are trying to keep up, but they can't. So whenever you're in a fight, you know the other person might be cheating. They might have an advantage. And with some of the new cheats, where they're things like built into the monitor, so there's absolutely nothing running on the PC at all, instead it's just using AI to analyze the picture that's coming to the monitor, things like that won't ever be able to be detected. Similarly, you know, there's some things people talk about, controller cheats and things like that, things to control recoil, or maybe even give you aimbot by doing something to your controller. These are things that can't be detected by things like ricochet. And so you'll never know for sure whether the enemies that you're fighting against are cheating or not. And that kind of sucks. But when you're playing against bots, the bots always play by the rules. The bots always play fair. Obviously, if the developer wanted to let them cheat to make them a bit tougher, they could do, but they're never going to develop them to be unfun to play against. They're never going to develop them so the bots are winning games, because why would that be fun forever? Like, for anyone. The developers always want the bots to kind of be the background characters in your story. You're the hero in your game. They're just there to kind of help you achieve that. So it's always going to kind of feel good fighting against bots. There's also other problems with fighting against real players, which can't be solved. There's always going to be toxic players. There's going to be players out to grief and troll you. There's going to be players that in any kind of communication are going to be horrible. You can't get rid of all the horrible people from the world. People will do mean things in video games. But bots won't. Bots aren't going to be racist or sexist or anything like that. They're not going to be saying mean things about your mum over the voice comms. The bots are always going to be kind of playing fair. They're always going to be okay. They could give them voice chat if they wanted. You know, you look at all of these AI models for people talking or text chat. They could do things like that if they wanted, and they would be able to talk and react to the game and not be toxic, not be horrible people. They're also not going to be trolling and griefing and making use of exploits or anything like that. They also don't care what happens to them. So the other big problem of gaming, which is something that Call of Duty's been facing, is skill-based matchmaking. How do you make it so people are having a fair fight and they're not up against people who are going to absolutely demolish them, and they're not going to be constantly dominating other people? Because it's not a lot of fun to be one of the players on the sort of the lower side of the bell curve of skill, where other players are constantly destroying you, where other players are making you realize that there's not really any point you being in that game at all. Obviously, in an ideal world, not obviously to some people, but obviously to me, in an ideal world, skill-based matchmaking would be really strict and the game would work out how good you are at the game and only put you up against people who are as good at you as that game. Sadly, it never works. Sadly, there's just not enough people in the sort of like game population for any major game, even something like Call of Duty, for that to be feasible. While there might be hundreds of thousands of people playing Call of Duty at any given time, that's split up across all the different modes, all of the different playlists, all of the different maps, all the different regions as well. So it just can't happen. They're always going to have to make compromises for things like matchmaking time. So you're always going to end up coming up against other players who are much better than you or much worse than you, and that's not a huge amount of fun. Bots can be tweaked to you perfectly. Bots can be playing at your skill level. If you're doing a bit too well, they can turn the bots up a little bit, and if you're having a little bit of a hard time, maybe you're just, you know, playing when you're a little bit tired, or you're playing and you've had a few bad games in a row, the game can turn the bot difficulty down in the background for you and then give you a few kills, give you a few times where you end up coming out on top. And that's pretty awesome. Like, that seems like it sounds really good. It even solves connection problems, that rather than having to try and connect 120 people to a server and try to make sure everybody's connections are as good as possible, which is inevitably going to lead to some connection weirdness, you only need to worry about your connection to the server where the bots are running, or you could even have the bots running on your own PC, and then you'll have a perfect connection. Imagine playing something like DMZ or Warzone with absolutely zero lag. Like, no delay at all. Everything happening instantly. No more getting shot around corners, because the entire thing is running on your system. You're just playing against bots. So what it comes down to, for me, the big negative of bots is that it's not the same as fighting a real player. And it never will be. You're never going to get that sense that you're playing against a real player, that feeling that you've bested another human. That's the kind of thing that matters. And that's the thing that, you know, for different people, it's going to matter a different amount. For me personally, while I enjoy fighting against bots, I seem to enjoy fighting against bots in Delta Force Hawk Ops and having these great adventures and stuff, as long as it keeps the challenge up, I think it's a pretty good time. I think eventually I would get a little bit bored of bots. Eventually there'd be a point where it's like, okay, like, what am I really doing here? This is kind of the same thing over and over. Humans are a bit more unpredictable. Humans are a little bit more random. You can have a kind of fun little grudge thing, you know, where you're like, oh, I remember that person. I played against them yesterday. This time I'm going to go back and get them. That kind of thing, you don't really have that with a bot. And I'm not sure how they could ever get over it, other than hiding the fact that we're playing against bots. If they can get really good at stopping us from even noticing that they're bots, which I think is what Delta Force has been doing, then maybe they'll be onto something. Now, I don't know what you think. Like, let me know in the comments. Would you be happy fighting against bots if it wasn't obvious that they're bots? If they were acting like people? Maybe if they were doing things like pinging, maybe even communicating? Do you think that would be good enough to sort of balance against all of the positives that you get, where it's, you know, lower matchmaking times, better connections, no cheats, constantly close games where you're not getting a game that's too easy or too hard, all of those good things? Is that outweighed by the kind of hollow feeling you might get from, I'm fighting against bots, I'm just playing against a computer? I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to this. I'm curious to see how far it goes with Delta Force, whether these bots are being used a lot in the final game, or whether this is just something for the test where maybe there's less people playing. Absolutely no idea, but I'm interested to see how it turns out. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.